Ladies and gentlemen, sitting outside this beautiful Saturday morning, and I thought I would give you the promised review video. Now, I'm going to keep this under 10 minutes, I promise, so I got to go fast. So if there's any questions, please put them in the chat on Google Classroom to this video, or bring them to me during tutorial on Monday or Tuesday. I'd love to talk to you more. We can do a go-to meeting if you need it. I'm here to help, because the most important thing is we understand the content so that we can dominate the APUSH test and understand American history better. So I'm here for you, but you have to take the initiative and reach out to me. Okay, so let's start. Unit 4 starts with the Revolution of 1800. Why is this so important? It gives us our first peaceful transition of power from John Adams and the Federalists to Thomas Jefferson and Democratic Republicans. Now remember, right before Adams leaves, he has the Judiciary Act of 1801. You get the midnight appointments. This is where you got John Marshall, and then the Marbury versus Madison case, which we'll get to. Jefferson comes into power. He is for the people. He wants less government, okay, more states' rights. We saw this earlier with his Virginia resolutions and going against Alexander Hamilton and his national bank, although he does not get rid of the national bank when he is president. His biggest thing in office is obviously the Louisiana Purchase. He doubles the size of the United States. He sends Lewis and Clark to explore this area, but the boundaries are a little iffy. But we gain all this land. He doubles the United States. Also during this time, he is going to have problems with both the French and the British because of their blockades against each other. Our trade really gets hurt, and so now how is Jefferson going to handle this? He tries diplomatic ways by putting the Embargo Act. We get the Intercourse Act. All tariffs basically stop trading. It hurts us, but it also helps build up our economy because we have to start making our own industry, making bill number 2. Now we get James Madison. James Madison comes into power, and we get the War of 1812. Causes for the War of 1812. The Warhawks want to go to war with Britain, also want to expand into Canada, and also gain Florida. Native Americans, Tecumseh is fighting us. We get the Battle of Tippecanoe. We get the Tecumseh Wars, which he's probably one of the greatest Native American chiefs that we have in American history. He unites the Indians against us. He will fight with the British, is one reason we will hate the Indians even more, because they always fight against us, so that doesn't help our unification of Native Americans and the American people at this time. So the Indians are being supported by the British. We get Warhawks who want to expand, and we get this idea of impressment, British taking our sailors. And so this leads us to the War of 1812. War of 1812 really doesn't solve any of these problems with the Treaty of Ghent, although the White House is burnt. Most famous battle is the Battle of New Orleans, because it's a victory, and B, it brings Andrew Jackson to the forefront of American memory at this time. Hartford Convention, it's during the Hartford Convention that Federalists in New England kind of end the Federalist Party. They didn't want necessarily nullification or leaving the United States, but they wanted some amendments to the Constitution. This is an epic fail, especially since Treaty of Ghent ends the war, and we get the Battle of New Orleans, which basically we say we've defeated the British twice. Treaty of Ghent, remember, doesn't really solve any of the problems, so the War of 1812 is like, but it ushers in this era of good feelings and also the antebellum, this time period between the War of 1812 and the Civil War. Okay, we get to James Monroe. He ushers in, he travels state to state saying, hey, this is an era of good feeling, strong nationalism, one party. We get rid of our first two-party system, so the Federalists are now gone. We just have the Democratic Republicans. During this time, a lot of focus is not only on expansion, but also our foreign policy. You get the Adams-Onis Treaty, which gives us Florida. You get the Monroe Doctrine that tells us European nations stay away from the Western Hemisphere. If you're here already, great. But if you want to come in and colonize or create problems, you're going to have to deal with the United States. This won't be used right away, but presidents down the road will look at the Monroe Doctrine as a key foreign policy document. Also at this time, one of the most important pieces is kind of our first band-aid after the Constitution, I guess you would say, regarding slavery, and it's all about expansion. Missouri wants to come in as a slave state. We get the Talmadge Amendment that says, hey, we're going to actually start getting rid of slavery. The South goes cray-cray. Henry Clay, our great compromiser, who was also a war hawk with John C. Calhoun, goes, wait, let's compromise. Okay, Missouri will come in as a slave state. Maine will come in as a free state. We'll keep the balance of free and slave states. And then anything in the Louisiana Purchase above the 3630 line, above it, will be free states. Anything below that will be slave states. Gives a lot more land to free states, which will kind of start the idea of, hey, how is the South going to keep equal states as we keep adding more and more states from this huge amount of territory we got? Kind of how we got into the Mexican-American War, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, you get understand our Virginia dynasty dies with Monroe. You had Jefferson, Madison, Monroe. You get John Quincy Adams, only in office for 4 years, kind of like his father, who was the second president. He is now the sixth president. Okay, he comes in. What you need to understand is the corrupt bargain that gave him the presidency. Andrew Jackson won the popular vote, but there wasn't a majority for the Electoral College. It has to go to Congress. John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay supposedly make this bargain where if Henry Clay gets John Quincy Adams the votes, John Quincy Adams will give Henry Clay Secretary of State, which it seems is the next person up for president. So Andrew Jackson cries out foul. He says this is a corrupt bargain. He spends the next 4 years campaigning against this. He becomes president, and he ushers in a new kind of democracy, a Jacksonian democracy, one for the people. Maybe more importantly, though, he changes the landscape of the executive branch. He takes more power. He says he's protecting against the establishment, the political corruption. So you get him using the veto. You get the spoil system, bringing his people into office. And you get three huge issues with him. Nullification crisis with South Carolina. South Carolina doesn't like the Tariff of Abomination in 1828. Says we're going to nullify. John C. Calhoun, which was Andrew Jackson's first vice president, is kind of leading the charge here. Andrew Jackson's willing to use force. It doesn't come to this. Henry Clay, again, brings about a compromise, a little less of a tariff. We get the bank war, where Jackson is totally against the bank. He feels it's against the common person. He's going to get rid of it. Henry Clay in the election of 1832 is going to use this as a political piece, thinking that if he can get the charter, the U.S. Bank rechartered earlier, that he could, this could be political capital for him. However, Andrew Jackson says, no, 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 I'm going to veto it, which he does, and the people agree because they re-elect Jackson. He then slowly takes all the money out of the U.S. National Bank, gives it to his pet banks and states, but this, remember, leads us into the recession that hit Martin Van Buren, the president after him, and his vice president, his second term, is going to have to deal with. You also get the Indian Removal Act, not necessarily against Native Americans. Andrew Jackson adopted two Native American sons, but he thought it was best that for white settlers who wanted the land and to not cause conflict, that they move west. And so you get Indian Removal Act. You also get the Trail of Tears under Martin Van Buren. Okay, three big themes through all this market revolution. The North will become industrialized. Why? Western expansion. We need to connect, so transportation is key. You start with turnpikes, Cumberland Road, then you get the canal system. Erie Canal is a great specific example, and then you get railroads. It's going to connect the North to the West and the North all together, allowing them to become industrialized. You get like the Lowell factory system. Okay, you get that. You get more resources, more transportation. People are taking things to market. North is industrializing. However, the South is going to be plantation-style agriculture, king cotton. It's Eli Whitney's cotton gin, which is going to let short staple cotton become the thing. And so slavery is going to go up. And so lifestyle, although not very many people own slaves in the South, is going to be all about that plantation lifestyle and their livelihood. So North industrializes, connecting to the West. The South is going to kind of stay in their agrarian style. I'm going to go over time. I apologize. Next thing, Marshall Court. Marshall Court is going to give us the power of the federal government. First thing, Marlboro versus Madison. Okay, gives us judicial review that the Supreme Court can say if a law is unconstitutional or not, constitutional or not, either way. Okay, so you get that. Two, you get the federal court being over, or the federal government being over the state government. You can see this Gibson versus Ogden with the interstate clause. You can see Fletcher versus Peck, Dartmouth versus that other person, I can't remember his name, but upholding the contract clause in Constitution. And then there was one other case I wanted to bring up. You got interstate commerce, okay, with Ogden versus Gibson, and you got the contract clause and the supremacy of the federal government over state governments. Antebellum reforms are going to be huge at this time. Thank you, Second Great Awakening. Okay, you get such things as the temperance movement, Carrie Nation. You get such things as abolition, which you get radical with David Walker. You get William Lloyd Garrison, who will start not as radical but move that way. You get Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth. You get the women's right movement. Seneca Falls Convention is really important to know, and the Declaration of Sentiments. Okay, you get the prison reform, Dorothea Dix, the call for education, Horace Mann. You get, with the women's movement, Elizabeth Cady Stanton would be a good name. The Beecher sisters, Harriet Beecher Stowe with Uncle Tom's Cabin is huge, critical, great book to read because it's one of those fundamental books in American history. You also get some movements, the utopian communities, Brooks Farm, Oneida, the Shakers. You get the formation of the Mormons, Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, out of the burnt over district in the Second Great Awakening, which Charles Finney was the major preacher there. And then you also at this time get transcendentalism, that nature, one nature with reason, civil disobedience, all these ideas that it's man can find the answers to things. Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Walt Whitman. Okay, I went over time, but I hope this helps. And also, please hit me up with any questions. See you Monday and Tuesday. Adios.